cult classic 1960s TV series The Prisoner tells the story of a former spy who wakes up to find himself in a mysterious and sinister holiday camp-like village where the sinister authorities are trying to extract information from him which he does not want to yield. They want to know why he resigned from his job. And in the 8th broadcast episode of The Prisoner, Dance of the Dead, a surreal espionage thriller becomes a horror. At the start of the 1967 episode, the village enlists the help of a former ally of Number 6, who is known as Number 42. We find out, unusually, his real name, Roland Walter Dutton, and he communicates with Number 6, played by Patrick McGoohan, seen here, while Number 6 is under some form of electronic hypnosis, but it doesn't work, and Number 2, the day-to-day controller of the village, decides to call it off. It's not working. Number 6 wakes up with no recollection of his ordeal. He makes the acquaintance of a black cat, which turns out to be a spy for Number 2, the controller of the village. Number 6 speaks to Number 240, his observer, a resident of the village assigned to monitor him, and discovers that there's going to be a carnival in the village. It's then that he tries to escape, but he's brought to heel by Rover, the sinister white sphere, which is used to patrol and police the village and to stop people from escaping. But then he makes a discovery. He spends the night on the beach and, upon awakening, finds a body washed up on the shore, which has a radio. He tries to listen to the radio, takes it to a high point in the village, and initially hears only static, but then he hears a voice, and it's saying something puzzling and enigmatic. "Nowhere in the world," the voice says, "is there more beauty than here. Tonight, when the moon rises, the whole world will turn to silver. If our torment is to end, if liberty is to be restored, we must grasp the nettle, even if it makes our hands bleed." Finally, it's carnival time. Honoured guests include Julius Caesar, Cleopatra and Elizabeth I, and even Napoleon. Number 6 appears in his own dinner jacket, looking very much like 007. Quite how he still has his own tuxedo remains a mystery. Number 2 offers an alternative theory when he asks why he doesn't have a costume. "Perhaps because you don't exist," she says. Number 6 slips out of the carnival and into the town hall, where he finds in the morgue the body which he'd launched into the sea. Another escape bid has been foiled. Number 2 tells him that the body will be altered to resemble him, to resemble Number 6, and then it will be dumped in the sea. And as far as the outside world is concerned, Number 6 will be considered dead. They will think that he has drowned. It's then that the carnival takes a darker turn and it becomes a Kafkaesque trial. Number 6 is put on trial accused of using a radio, which is against the village rules, although Number 6 questions whether anyone has actually ever seen these rules. Number 6 is prosecuted by Number 240, and Number 2 leads his defence. Number 6 demands that a character witness is brought forward, and he chooses his old colleague, Dutton. He is produced, but by this time, unfortunately, he has lost his mind. He's wearing a jester's costume. He appears to have been lobotomized, and he's waving around, as you can see here, a white balloon, perhaps reminiscent of Rover, on the end of a stick. Here we can see Number 6 with Number 240, his observer, and her costume is Little Bo Peep. Well, at the end of the trial, he is sentenced to death and understandably runs away from the carnival. He sprints off and all of the participants chase after him. He then finds an underground passage and he escapes through that passage and makes another discovery. Number 6 finds a teletype machine which was used for sending and receiving text, and it appears to be in operation at that moment. Number 2 then enters the room and number 6 asks her, not unreasonably, why everyone else is trying to kill him, and she says they don't know that you're already dead. Now, at that point, number 6 vows never to give in to the village, and number 2 says, "How very uncomfortable for you, old chap," and her mocking laughter leads us into the end credits. And we also discover that the teletype machine, despite having been damaged, has jumped back into life and is still operating. The writer of this episode, Anthony Skene, was keen on the idea that the teletype machine, the teleprinter, was number 1. Number 1 is the mysterious overall controller of the village, who we don't meet until the very last episode, the 17th episode. But the idea that the printer is number 1 is never really explored fully. Was it perhaps a conduit of communication, a method of communication with number 1? Again, we don't know. It's an enigmatic ending. Skene's experience of writing for The Prisoner was perhaps rather frustrating, because he said that it was essentially a cosmic void. He never saw a single piece of paper. There wasn't really any guidance about what the writer should be doing. He said they sat there waiting for ideas, which gave him a free hand. So Skene made explicit his referencing of French director Jean Cocteau's work on Dance of the Dead, particularly Orphée from 1950. That's a film based on the legend of Orpheus and Eurydice, a dreamlike film which shows a contemporary French poet becoming obsessed by some abstract poetry he hears on a car radio and descending into the underworld. And of course, a radio also plays an important part in proceedings in Dance of the Dead, which is also a very dreamlike, indeed nightmarish episode of The Prisoner. Dance of the Dead was the 8th episode of The Prisoner to be broadcast in the UK, although there is a reference from number 6 to the fact that he is new here, new in the village, and that might be because this episode was the 4th to be shot, despite being the 8th to be broadcast. Patrick McGoohan, who played number 6, was a perfectionist, and he wasn't particularly happy with the first incarnation of the episode, so it was shelved, but it was later rescued by an editor who got it into broadcastable shape, and McGoohan was pleased with it, and eventually, of course, it did see the light of day. A large part of the episode's success is Mary Morris's turn as number 2. It's the 3rd time in the series that we've seen a female at number 2, but she's the only number 2 to take part in the opening credits. And she's dressed as Peter Pan at the carnival. The initial plan, Anthony Skene, the writer, was told, was for Alec Guinness or Trevor Howard to play number 2, and they would have been dressed as Jack the Ripper, a plan that was changed when Mary Morris came on board. Dance of the Dead is a transitional episode in the series because it marks the moment when it becomes even more surreal and takes a turn for the dark or the darker, and indeed introduces an element of horror into the show. The entire series of 17 episodes of The Prisoner is a kind of dance between number 6 and his nemeses, the people who run the village, his captors and tormentors. And perhaps one of the most disturbing storylines of the entire series is in Dance of the Dead, the story of Roland Walter Dutton, who we see here in his jester's outfit, reduced to a mindless simpleton after a lobotomy, following on from harsh interrogations by the village authorities. It's a chilling image.